On today's show, we're talking about when to tell your kids about wealth and how to tell your kids about wealth. And Matt, this came up in a discussion with a client. They were filling out the FAFSA form with their son who's heading off to college. By the way, the FAFSA form is the form that you fill out to apply for financial aid. You might be wondering why a wealthy family might be applying for financial aid, but the reason is because you actually qualify for merit-based scholarships by doing that. So that's an aside. But anyways, they were filling out this form, and the son says, "Oh, Dad, there's a section here where it says, what's your income?" And the dad said, What do I do in this situation? And that was the question that he posed to me. So we thought this would be a good topic to talk about today, about when to tell your kids about your money, if you guys have money, and then how exactly to do it. And we know that every situation is different, but we wanted to provide some best practices that we've seen or we've heard or read about, and hopefully this will help you as you try to tackle this yourself. Most of the literature out there focuses on what shouldn't be done or people that do it wrong, but we wanted to highlight some things that we think are doing it correctly, or people who are handling this really well. How are they doing this? We want to share that with you.
Yeah, I'm excited to dive in, Stephen. I think the two questions really at the core here are when these discussions should happen and how they should happen. So let's jump in here and start with when these discussions should happen.
And kind of cut right to the chase here. There's not a one-time conversation that you kind of break the news. You know, you imagine sitting down at the kitchen table and saying, "Hey kids, we have X amount of dollars." That's not what you should do. What maybe people don't realize is that they are already communicating to their kids and family what wealth means to their life and how they should approach wealth. One of the things that we want to highlight here is that consistently seeing financial literacy or talking about finances or how you're handling finances in action is way more effective than a one-time conversation that you're having with your kids. It's better to see it concretely than to talk about it in the abstract.
Yeah, one phrase that comes to mind for me here, Stephen, is the idea that values and lessons a lot of time in a family and in a parent-child relationship, a lot of times things are caught and not taught. And so as it comes to communicating wealth to kids, like you said already, there are things being communicated in what we say and in what we do as parents. And the important thing is that the right values are being modeled, because that will do a lot more good in the long term versus any specific lesson or book or seminar or family meeting with the advisor there talking about things. The things that matter most, based on what we've seen and experienced, is parents actually modeling proper values themselves as far as what they say and what they do with their money. And ultimately, if the values have not been passed on properly as they should, then we need to be hesitant as parents about passing on valuables and giving inheritance to the kids.
And if you as the parents are maybe unsure about how you yourself relate to money, that's where you need to start. That's step one. Because if you don't have a good grounding and a good grasp of how am I relating to this wealth and how is it affecting how I behave, then that's going to trickle down to your kids. Another thing that we want to highlight here is that the most successful parents, they operated as a team. So it wasn't just one parent doing one thing, another person, doing something completely different. They got on the same page here and were willing to raise their kids with these similar values.
That's another example of a phrase that I love, Stephen, that's near and dear to my heart, of teamwork makes the dream work.
Yeah, yeah. Exactly. Got to have a great team. Okay. But here's some of our money values that we think are good to pass on, especially if you have family wealth. So we want to knock down, we have kind of a list here that we want to go through.
Yeah, I think the first one, Stephen, which I'm excited to dive into a little bit more, is the idea and the value that material possessions are ultimately not that important relative to other things that the family is actually focused on.
And this is a key one. That's probably why it's number one. And even though that you have wealth and have the ability to buy maybe a lot of things, great families are families that teach their kids money values and handling money well show restraint in this area. So even if you can afford a certain type of car, maybe they back that down a bit on purpose. Maybe they can afford a certain type of vacation and stay at a certain type of hotel, but they show restraint to back that down on purpose because they're trying to model the value that, hey, it's not all about the stuff that you have. It's not all about the experiences that you have and that sort of thing.
Yeah, ultimately the point being money is a tool that helps pay for things like experiences and certainly material possessions like cars and clothes and things that we need as humans to survive, but ultimately family relationships and character in terms of how we're actually living and what we're actually doing as people are more important for sure than the material possessions and more important than the amount of money that we have.
Yep. So that's number 2. Money has its place. Human connections over material possessions. That's the thing that should be highlighted and valued. Number 3, and this is going to talk about spending, how you spend your money. A good value to have is saving up for quality versus just buying things willy-nilly. So there's a couple of principles I think when you have to save up for something. One of them is self-control. We all need some of that in our day. Delayed gratification. So instead of being able to buy something instantaneously and having it show up at your front porch, can you wait a little bit in order to anticipate it? And then appreciation and then the value of a dollar. And I think the only way that you really learn the value of a dollar is by working and knowing how much things cost and the effort it takes to earn money. So I think just the research shows that it's less once when you receive something, be it something that you've wanted to buy, that's when kind of the dopamine kick dissipates. So everything that gets you excited about something is all in the anticipation of receiving that item. And then once when you get it, then it's kind of going, okay, that's over. What's next? But I think that there's a key value in there of knowing that, hey, that's part of the fun and that's part of life of being able to wait for something and enjoy the waiting process.
Yeah, the longer we can stay in that kind of in-between period of making a decision to get something in the anticipation of actually getting it, I think happier we'll be in the long run, as counterintuitive as that might seem. And
then the last value is generosity. And Matt and I love talking about or thinking about generosity, but I think this is the big key as to I think the real barometer of whether money has a hold of you or whether you're using money as a tool. Does money give you your significance and your security? And the way that you can tell if it does or doesn't is how generous you are, just kind of plain and simple. If you're willing to part with your money, then that means it doesn't have a hold of you. I think that generous people realize that money is just money. It's a tool. It can be used to bless your family and that sort of thing. But beyond that, it doesn't give you ultimate value and power.
Yeah, there's a lot of joy to be had as humans in helping other people. And one great way for wealthy people to do that is through giving money away. And I think a lot of people like to think of themselves as generous, and ultimately the proof is in the pudding with the checkbook and the credit card statement showing where the money's going. And if we look at those things and we see that we are being generous, I think ultimately that'll be better for us and for what we're teaching to our kids in the long run.
Yep. Yeah, if you really want to find out what you value, go look at your credit card or bank statement, and that will tell you. Okay, so those were our 4 money values. Number 1, material possessions are not that important. Number 2, money has its place. Number 3, you want to save up and buy for quality. And then number 4 is generosity. Okay, so you need to ask yourself, how are you modeling these values? Or maybe you have some different values that you wanted to add to this or replace. Whatever the values may be, how are you doing this as a parent, modeling this to your kids? And sometimes I think as parents, or once when you've achieved a certain amount of success, you like to treat yourself to things. Sometimes it can be cars, boats, off-road vehicles, just kind of buying the newest thing to kind of fill your garage and that sort of thing. I know maybe guys gravitate more towards that. Another thing to think about is, hey, when you say, hey, let's go do something fun with my friends or that sort of thing, does an outing involve shopping? Because then you're just communicating to your kid, hey, this is what fun is. This is buying new things and buying new clothes, whatever that is. That's what fun is. So how are you modeling those values? And all those are obviously not necessarily good examples of money values that you want to be modeling, but just in the way that we act and behave, that says a lot about what we value.
Yeah, and having nice things, going on nice vacations, doing nice things for your kids are all good, well and good, and those are ultimately great opportunities to have conversations about how grateful you are to be able to do those things, how much hard work contributed to the ability to do that, and highlighting the nice things that you have and the nice things that you buy and the nice things that you do as a wealthy family, highlighting those things and opportunities and experiences as opportunities for your kids to see the importance and the value of money and how it can create experiences and help build relationships.
If you realize you are maybe not sharing these values or maybe not as well as you would like to be, maybe the conversation with your kids looks something like this. You can say, hey, son, daughter, mom and dad realize that we haven't been doing a good job of modeling good values about money to you. We're working on changing that, and we hope to change how our entire family values money, including you. Something like that. It doesn't have to be, all hands on deck type of thing, but I think that kids are really receptive to honesty and transparency from parents, knowing that they don't have it all together because they're going to be teenagers, or maybe they are already, or young adults, and they've already figured that out, that you don't have it all together. So you might as well admit it and be willing to change and work on yourself, because again, that's another thing that you're modeling to your kids, which is, I think, a good thing to do. This conversation, it shouldn't just be a one-time inheritance talk. We believe that you should start young. You should start talking about money at a young age, and it should build over the course of your kids' childhood, adolescence, and then young adulthood. So Matt, what types of things should we be talking about for, say, early childhood? Young kiddos.
Yeah, I think young kids are usually and often more perceptive than we give them credit for. And the important point about this phase of their life for you as their parent is to notice how their intake of information is shaping the attitudes that they have, because ultimately they don't have context for numbers and that sort of thing, and how to put any income or dollar amount into context, because they don't know how much incomes are, how much things cost, any of that. But ultimately we can help them by showing them attitudes around money and how we handle it, how we think about it, how we get it, what we do with it. And so focusing on the messages that we're sending as far as the qualitative information and the attitudes that we build is critical.
And then as the kids move to, say, middle school or through high school, kids start noticing differences between their friends and their parents, who has money, who doesn't, or we should say who appears to have money, if we're going to bring a millionaire next door reference in there. But again, this is the time to keep talking about the subject, keep bringing it up, but maybe not the best time to talk about details. Don't say, oh, hey, kid in 6th grade, did you know mom and dad have X and X millions of dollars? Again, they can't contextualize what that means yet because they don't have jobs, especially in middle school, or in high school maybe they do, but they're probably earning minimum wage, something like that. They have no idea what millions and millions of dollars might look like. So kind of slow play the numbers again during this time, but continue to bring up the subject of money and those values.
Yeah, and I think this is where the questions will start popping up, and maybe even as early as elementary school, as far as kids noticing what shoes other kids are wearing, or what types of houses their friends live in, and how much space they have in their yard versus other people, and starting to play the comparison game of thinking through why different friends or family members have different things. And like you said, Stephen, it's still not time to get into specifics because kids can't contextualize numbers yet, but acknowledging that there is gratitude for good things and avoiding comparison at all costs is always a good rule in any area of life, but especially when it comes to money. And the more that we can help our kids avoid playing the comparison game, I think the better off they'll be.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And then as your kids move to the late teens, college, early adulthood, this is when you can start having those more concrete discussions. Because again, your young adults have more real world experience and they're more capable of interpreting kind of what this wealth means. I want to touch really briefly on when not to give specifics. So when kids are going to ask, especially in middle school, I mean, my kids are younger than that right now, but they love to ask questions. So they might ask, how much money do we have, Mom and Dad? Or what do you make each year, Mom and Dad? So-and-so says his dad makes this. How much are you going to give me when you're gone? So I don't know. Kids ask whatever they want. And again, our recommendation here is to don't answer with amounts yet. It's okay to say, hey, we're going to share some more information later, but we're still kind of working through our decisions about money. And circling back to how we started this conversation, Matt, with the client situation, going through the FAFSA and their kids said, hey, Dad, how much money do you make each year? The way that this dad solved it is he just said, hey, give me a second. Why don't I fill in this information? He took the laptop kind of in it, so he's the only one who could see it, could put in his income information and then go to the next screen and give it back to his son and that sort of thing. So it wasn't the right time to say, oh, Dad makes so-and-so, why don't you enter that in for me? He said, hey, I'll put this in and we'll have a conversation later. It's, again, the goal here is the term I'll use is called developmental pacing. So whatever stage of development they are at, that's kind of what you want to meet them at with your, whatever level of I guess, money talk that you want to share during that time period. Premature disclosure, I think, can be risky because it can distort motivation. So if a kid knows, hey, my parents are multi-millionaires and I'm 12 years old, that potentially could change how they go about their day or schoolwork and that sort of thing. It can create this sense of entitlement in them. And then I think what's actually probably the most distorting is it can freeze their identity around money. So they become tied to the identity of, oh, my parents or our family has this amount of money. And that's who they become, or that's how they view themselves from that standpoint, which I think is probably does more hurt than good. We talked about when to do it. And now let's talk about how to do that. And like everything, there is a spectrum. People want to tell their kids everything and just be completely transparent and open the floodgates, share bank statements, that sort of thing, investment accounts. Or they want complete secrecy and tell them nothing. And don't even bring it up. Kids grow up and say, I have no idea how much money my parents have. And then when they pass away, either they're very surprised, and that's a whole different situation. But we feel like the answer is probably towards the middle, somewhere along there. And I think the reason that people tend towards one spectrum or the other is because they're trying to protect, I guess, different situations that they've experienced in their mind, or situations that they've seen other people go through. So, for example, the secrecy end, they're worried that revealing anything is going to demotivate their kids. Kind of the things that we talked about before. But again, what we're trying to highlight is that there's a certain age of development where it's appropriate to actually start sharing things with your kids. I think the wealth industry as a whole, we like to lean more towards the transparency side of things. So if you have a family office or work with a financial advisor, they might say, hey, we need to have a family meeting or a quarterly family meeting and talk about all the workings of family wealth and that sort of thing. So it kind of leans more towards transparency. But again, we think the optimal approach is somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, I think especially in situations where the family has attained wealth through running a family-owned business, the industry tends to skew more towards transparency for the sake of kids and second, third, and future generations questioning whether they want to get involved in the business, how involved they want to be. So having information, I think, has value in situations where it impacts career decisions for kids. But yeah, for families and individuals that don't have privately owned businesses that are driving the wealth generation, then yeah, our thinking is definitely towards the middle, where you're not disclosing nothing, but you're also not sharing all the information too soon.
Yeah. So let's kind of drill down about the middle approach a little bit more, because just give some kind of concrete, I guess, ideas here. So parents need to be honest about the fact that they have money. Of course, age appropriateness, probably more like college, young adulthood. But they need to communicate to the children, and the children need to understand that that's their parents' money that they've worked for, and it's not their own. It's not the kids. Or say maybe the parents themselves inherited money, then they need to communicate to their kids that, hey, this is something that has belonged to our family over some generations, and that there's a history and a responsibility of stewardship attached to this. So it's going to carry on after you guys are gone. So don't think that this is all for you. This is beyond you, in the good sense. So don't hide the fact that you have money from your kids. Wealth isn't a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. We don't want to downplay that. But then also don't showcase it so that, your kids don't ever have to question whether you guys have money or not. I think moderation is the key here. And here's another good barometer that I think if you asked your kids about money and how much you might have and that sort of thing, they would say something along the lines of, I think we have enough money. I don't know. We seem to be okay. I think that's actually a pretty good answer, because that means that, hey, their basic needs are being met, but they're not. There's no flaunting or anything like that happening, and they seem to be unsure about whether there's limitless funds out there.
Yeah, I know one of the books, Stephen, that you and I have talked about at length and we've shared with clients as well is Coventry Edwards Pitt, who's written a few books about wealth and passing it on to inheritors and different dynamics that go into that. And she's been a great resource of ours and someone whose writings our clients have found helpful. And her rule of thumb is consistent with what we've already talked about, which is the inheritors who she's worked with and studied through surveys and other things felt best prepared for their lives when their parents were honest about having money and didn't deny it, but also kept it, relatively secret for some period of time and didn't just give it all to them up front as far as how much they had and when they would get it. So kind of striking that middle ground we've been talking about.
All right. So as we wrap up here, we talked about when and then how it should be done. So just to review, when you're already telling your kids about your wealth right now with the way that you behave as parents. So remember that. Remember, what message are you currently sending? Is it one that's encouraging independence and motivation? Or is it one that's encouraging entitlement and maybe hampering motivation? Bring up money at different age stages and in the right capacity. So probably you want to defer specifics about meaning dollar amounts until 20s or late 20s, even late 20s. And then I think our biggest encouragement is just to bring up money conversations in your daily life, when you're grocery shopping, when you're, maybe have to buy gifts for a friend's birthday party or stuff like that. When you're paying for a vacation, bring your kids into that conversation and say, hey, as I'm booking this, or I know one family, which I think is a great idea, they had their kids plan the family vacation and gave them a budget of saying, hey, this is the amount that we want to spend on the vacation. You guys plan it. So then they had to go, book the hotel, book flights, all that sort of thing. I think it just gave them a really great real world experience of how much stuff costs and and that sort of thing. And then secondly is how it should be done. And it should be done in conversation as you go about your regular life. It shouldn't be something that's hidden, secret. There's no secrets here, but it also shouldn't be flaunted. And then last but not least, just try to be have as open of communication that you can with your kids directly, so that they're not looking around and saying, hey, we're rich, this money's going to come to me, because you've explicitly told them, yes, there'll be something, but don't count on it. You need to make your own life first. So I think those are the things that we wanted to touch on, Matt. Any closing thoughts?
No, I think we covered it, Stephen. As usual, the wise approach is the middle path between two extremes, and when it comes to how this should be done, it's usually a balance of when to share the right amount of information, but not too soon, and ultimately not to keep it totally secret. And then for the when conversation or the when question, it's like it's already happening now, whether we want to admit it or not. And so it's important to think about the messages that we're sending to our kids in terms of what we say and what we do.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you, Matt, so much for the conversation today. Thank you to Kevin, our editor. And thanks to you guys for listening in and watching. We'll see you next time.